Hi guys, it's Taylor and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my top 10 worst books of 2018. 2018 I actually didn't read a lot of particularly bad books. Just some of them fell into the middling range. But don't you worry, there will be a little bit of ranting in this video. So let's not waste time because I've got another long video to film after this one. So let's get started. Coming in at number 10, we've got The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. So this book, don't get me wrong, was actually quite good. I believe I gave it 3 or 3.5 stars out of 5. I really did enjoy it. But this overall comes down to enjoyability, and unfortunately it was just way too depressing for me. So I didn't really connect with it. However, it's a good book and I highly recommend you read it. I know there are a lot of people on BookTube who enjoyed it. If you don't know what this book is about, it's about a girl who gets raped by her brother's best friend, and it kind of follows her journey through... A cat just ran across in my backyard. We don't have a cat. It follows this girl's journey through high school and kind of her coping with this traumatic event that happened. So that being said, there is a huge trigger warning for sexual assault and rape, but this is overall a good book, just it wasn't my cup of tea. Coming in at number 9, we've got Hellboy, Seed of Destruction by Mike Mignola and John Byrne? This man. So this book, or comic book series, is the first in the Hellboy series, and I love the movies. Guillermo del Toro's films are fantastic. Not too optimistic about the trailer for the new one, but otherwise, you know, I love the movies. So I decided to give the comics a try during Booktubeathon. Now the reading rush, and it doesn't have the same sense of fun and wonder that I believe Guillermo del Toro's series did, but you know, it was okay. It was fine. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I might continue with this series, I might not. I don't feel very strongly either way. If you don't know what this series is about, it's about this sort of demon or monster from another realm named Hellboy who comes to America and fights like supernatural crimes for the PRD, the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense. He's joined by is it pyrokinetic? Someone named Liz who has the power of fire, and a sort of fish-like creature named Abe Sapien. Like I said, the movies are better. Next up, we've got Pride by Ibby's a Boy. This is a modern-day retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but from the point of view of a Afro-Latina and black woman, Lizzie Bennett, but not, her name is like Zuri. Her name is Zuri. And, you know, a guy named Darcy who's also black, and it's kind of takes place in the hood. And I had really high hopes for this book. And like I said, it's not bad per se, and if you like it, that's great. It just didn't feel like a Pride and Prejudice adaptation to me. I think Ibby's a Boy didn't completely understand the dynamic between Lizzie and Darcy. A lot of adaptations actually get this wrong, including this one adaptation I really like called Bride and Prejudice, which is a sort of Bollywood American version of Pride and Prejudice. But something a lot of adaptations tend to get wrong is that Lizzie doesn't absolutely loathe Darcy. She dislikes him and almost leans into hate, but she doesn't loathe him. And what ends up happening in adaptations that assume that Lizzie just hates this man is that every time they're in the same room together, Lizzie just immediately bites into him. Darcy breathes and Elizabeth is there to chew his head off. And that's not how the book is. She doesn't like him and she's ready to come at him whenever he says something stupid, and her own inner monologue, like from her own inner monologue, you can tell she doesn't like him, but for the most part, she's civil. She's as civil to him as he is to her, and she will argue with him, but it's not, you know, she's not screaming at him and so on, and that's something this adaptation gets wrong. Also, they get the whole, like, there's no Mr. Collins scene. Like, why was he even in this book? Like, if you're not going to have the Mr. Collins proposal scene, why is Collins in this book? There was no reason for him or the Charlotte equivalent, and it got on my nerves because you just had them to have them, not to do anything with them. Mr. Collins and Charlotte Mr. Collins and Charlotte actually play a huge role into the overall message and theme of Pride and Prejudice, and to leave them out, but leave out their function, but to still leave them in, it just leaves you with two characters who do nothing. But yeah, that's it. Got away from myself there. But yeah, that's it. Next up at number 7, we've got Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. Yeah. Woo! So, this is like one of those famous murder mysteries, the Poirot murder mysteries, and it's just about someone who ends up murdered on a train, and everyone on the train has some sort of motive, and you have to figure out who killed, this guy. Yeah, I read it for Booktubeathon, the reading rush, and it was fine. It was okay. I didn't particularly care one way or the other. It wasn't for me. It wasn't to my taste. Next up at number 6, we've got A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe by Alex White. This book, I feel like other people would like this book. It just wasn't to my taste. Again, I'm starting to realize that I'm not a huge science fiction person. I tend to kind of not understand the world building, which is weird because it's not that different from fantasy, but the world building doesn't click with me. I don't care for the scientific elements. I don't get it. Not saying I'm giving up completely on science fiction, but I'm starting to realize it might not be my cup of tea. So this book is about this crew that's trying to find this missing ship, and let me tell you, I barely remember anything about this book. I know that it was 2 female main characters. One was an older woman and like a former pilot, and the other one is like a race car driver, and she was black and bisexual. That is all I remember from the characters. I think they're trying to set up a sort of Star Trek group dynamic, but I didn't really get that as much. It wasn't my cup of tea. If you like it, great. Next up, this might surprise you, but we're doing Empire Star by Samuel Delany. This book I didn't particularly care for. Now, if you know me, you know I loved Samuel Delany's Babel 17. Absolutely loved it, but Empire Star just didn't do it for me. I'm not a huge fan of time travel stories, and this whole book is a time travel story. They're like alternate universes and time travel, and it gets really confusing, and I didn't particularly care. The main character is like a crystal computer system thing. I didn't like it. I wish I could tell you what it's about, but I didn't understand it. It's a Bildungsroman, which means a coming-of-age story about this guy who finds this crystal, and called like the Empire Star or something, and he has to bring the crystal to like safety or something. It's told from the point of view of the crystal. Weird. It's a weird book. Yeah, I didn't like it. Next up, we've got Pym by Matt Johnson. This book is weird. Don't get me wrong, I think I liked it, but it was weird. So I don't know how to describe it. So it's basically about this former English professor who's like obsessed with American literature, and he loses his job because he doesn't want to be head of the sort of diversity committee because he's the only black professor on staff, and he doesn't want to be the sort of token black professor. And he loses his job, and while he's like clearing his head, he comes across this document that suggests that this one Edgar Allan Poe novel, the only novel Edgar Allan Poe ever wrote, could be true and based off of real events. This book is called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, and the novel describes a sort of island full of only black people, untouched by white civilization. So in a fit of desperation, he gets together an all-black crew and sets out for like the Arctic or wherever to find this land of all blackness. It's weird. It's a weird book, and I think I enjoyed reading it while I was reading it, but looking back on it, I don't know what I read, to be honest. I will say it's funny. I really clicked with the humor of this book, And there is a sort of absurdity to this, but it needed to be about 100 pages shorter, because after a while it's just drawn out, and it's weird. Number 3, we've got The Best of All Possible Worlds by Karen Lord. This book was such a disappointment to me. I mean, my professor, because I read this book while I was taking an Afrofuturism and Afrofantasy class, so my professor described it as Star Trek meets Jane Eyre meets Pride and Prejudice. I love all 3 of those things, so I was excited. And what I got was something really boring and not that intriguing and just not memorable at all. So this book is another science fiction book. You can see there's a pattern on this sort of list. This book is about this sort of linguist or scientist, I don't even remember, but she is tasked with helping this alien race who the majority of its population was wiped out, find links to their own race so that they can try and repopulate. And she joins and she meets this guy who's basically Black Spock, and they fall in love, kind of, but they're traveling throughout the planet trying to find links, and it's weird. I didn't like it. It was boring. And that's that on that. Number 2, we've got The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This is another science fiction book where I have no idea what happened. I don't know if it's science fiction or fantasy, but I didn't get it. It's like people have powers, but the government doesn't like those powers, so people with those powers are like rounded up and sent to these sort of concentration camps, but they're not. They're run by these sort of aliens who are training these people to fight back against another alien species that's trying to come through the portal, and the rest are servants, and the main character, I guess, doesn't want to do that, because who would? And it was boring, and I didn't care. I couldn't get into the physical book. I couldn't get into the audiobook. Hated it. And last but not least, I'm sure if you've been watching this series for a while or follow me on Twitter, you know what number 1 is, and that is Seafire by Natalie C. Parker. I hated this book. I really, really hated this book, and I don't want to be talking for an eternity discussing why I hated this book, so I will leave the link to my Seafire rant either up here once I figure out how to do that, or down in the description box below, because my god, this book was bad. And I think what makes it worse is that I can handle all of the other books being, something I don't like, but maybe something someone else will like, but I cannot for the life of me understand how anyone would enjoy this book. The characterization was non-existent, and it claimed to be a feminist pirate story, but it wasn't feminist, really. Like, just having only females in your narrative does not a feminist book make. It doesn't, I'm sorry. And there's something kind of sinister in calling this book feminist when all of this whole pirate crew only allows females, even though males are actual victims of this warlord. So, if you don't know what this book is about, it's about a girl named Caledonia Styx. Oh god. And her best friend Pisces, and when they're little, Caledonia accidentally gives away the location of her family's ship to this one guy. And the guy is a crew member for this evil pirate warlord named Eric, and Eric's fleet sinks the ship, and Caledonia and Pisces' families are just dead. They're gone. And so Caledonia vows to form an all-female pirate crew and take down Eric or whatever. And they do that, but they capture one of Eric's men, and they find out that their Pisces and Caledonia's brothers weren't taken, or weren't killed, but they were instead taken by the pirates, and they set off on a journey, and it's bad. The sisterhood, I don't get it. And I think it's because this book skipped an entire book. The first book, in my opinion, should have been Caledonian Pisces putting together this crew, focusing on building the bond between the crew, building up a sense of trust, and then the last book, or like the last chapter or so, should have been them finding out that their brothers are alive. Then the next book could be whatever Seafire was, but better, and it wasn't that, and it was bad. It was so bad, and that is why it is my least favorite book of 2018, partially because it gets this reputation as being a feminist pirate story, and it's not feminist. It's bad. It's so bad. And those were my top 10 least favorite books of 2018. Sorry to get a little bit ranty on you guys, but you know I had to do it. So, what were your least favorite books of 2018, or have you read any of these books? Please let me know in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you all in my next video. Bye, guys.